Hey everyone, welcome back. This is episode 3 of The Adventure Engineers. I am joined by the amazing Arcane Library itself as a library, an anthropomorphized library. That's terrible.
It's just an eyeball. It's just an eyeball. Nice,
love it. Kelsey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Awesome. Super excited about this and nervous. I'm not an adventure writer, so I get to watch your process, and I'm really excited about that.
Oh man, I hope something comes out of it. Sometimes you sit down and just struggle, but we'll see.
I can see where this could be a little bit nerve-wracking. Like, okay, time to create.
I guess. But that's part of the process too. You have to make yourself do it sometimes. So this is good. This is good for us.
Yeah, I love it. Zombie, thank you. You are the man. I appreciate that very much. Okay, so let's talk about what we're doing tonight. Do you want to give the rundown? I think this was your idea, and I'm super excited about it. So why don't you explain to everyone what we're going to be doing here?
Oh, sure thing. So tonight we are working on an adventure that we know we're going to use together. So Stephen is going to run this adventure, which is for the Poe Museum. And I think you guys have done it once before, and I got to write that adventure. And this time we're going to do it again, and we're going to work a bit more collaboratively on it, because the intention behind this is for like a live stream and live play. So it really helps to have kind of the writer and the person who's going to essentially be performing it sort of collaborating here. So I wish I'd had you the last time I was writing this. I was working on it like while I was traveling, and I was like, there were so many times I wanted to ask you something. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this will be fun. We both have an IT background, and right now I'm viewing this as like a requirements gathering session. Like, okay, let's lay out like what are the things we want to accomplish. I'm sure you're approaching it from a much more creative standpoint, but I'm like, okay, we got to make sure it meets these, requirements so that the end users are happy with it. And by the way, thank you, Desiree the Gamer. Really appreciate that, as always. Thank you. Cool. So let's talk about the last adventure, I think, and how it evolved, because I think I have some specific things that you did in that adventure that were stellar that I want to make sure we don't forget about. So I would love to hear even just a quick, like, how did you approach that last one, and how did you kind of bring it from inception to completion?
Yes. Okay. That's a great question. So the last one, originally, when we first kind of sat down to talk about it, I had done a lot of research like leading up to the idea portion, because we knew it was going to be about Poe. And so I wanted to use Poe works as sort of the source of ideas. So that was actually the very first step, was just sort of like ingesting as much Poe work as I could and trying to see if I could like pick up some interesting vibes or themes from that.
Right.
And then along with that, like having all of those ideas and sort of a general vibe of what we wanted, then I had to sit down, and when we talked, we had to really think about like, what are our design goals for this? Like, what is the purpose of the adventure? Who's going to be playing? What level? All that. So that's where it started. Yeah, I guess that's how it started. There we go.
Cool. And so, I think you hit on a couple of things that worked really well for that one. I mean, I couldn't be happier with the way that live show went. Cicadas and horns and everything.
Bats.
The bat was literally maybe the coolest thing that could have happened, and I didn't even see it live. I was looking down at my notes when it happened, and I was like, what was that? And everyone was freaking out. So, But the adventure, as all of your adventures do, they flow very narratively. So it was very easy for me to like keep the pressure, stay on the beat to make sure we weren't, going to go 6 hours or something like that. It worked really well. You had 2 combats, if I remember correctly. Some great opportunities for me to play NPCs and simultaneously for the players to interact with people. So lots of role playing opportunities. You nailed it. I mean, it was the perfect adventure especially for what it was doing, especially with newer D&D players who were killing it. So
thank you. That's good to hear. I remember when we first sat down, like when I was kind of planning with you.
Right.
I ended up coming up with like a 5-bullet outline of the path of the adventure, like as I sort of envisioned it. And honestly, like that just came about after reading a lot of material. I was like, okay, so what are like 5 kind of things that we could shoot for with this adventure?
Right.
And then you helped me sort of refine that into actual scenes, but it really just started there, you know? Like,
Right.
here's just 5 things that I want to happen in here. And it turned into an adventure from there.
Yeah.
So.
But that makes sense. And that's kind of what we've talked about in the previous ones of that sort of, you know, it's a series of encounters strung together. So you can even think about them separate, you know, just like you do, just like you presented in your book. You know, we string together really interesting things and kind of form that connective tissue to get to the heart of the really exciting stuff.
Try. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm super excited. For those of you who watched the live show, I will say this. We're going to pick up with basically the same characters. We're going to be level 2 now. And with both the Poe Museum and Kelsey's, generous participation, I would hope down the road we can continue sort of, you know, they don't have to necessarily be the strongest overarching narrative, but I think it would be neat to kind of follow on one from the other and sort of have this, you know, yearly, or even I think they want us to try to do 2 this year. They were really happy with it. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's
we'll
so
see
flattering.
about that. Yeah, I know. It's pretty exciting. So yeah, let's jump right in. Do you want to go ahead and have me jump over to the notes here?
Yeah, let's do it. We have
Sweet.
notes. We'll
All right.
explain them.
Here we go. Boom. New screen. Sharing some notes.
Can
All
you
right.
guys see that all? Is it the
I can
Oh,
zoom in. I'll zoom in a little too.
cool?
There we go.
Scooching my screen around. Yeah, so this is what we have. So this is I guess this is going to walk us through sort of the preliminaries of the process I use, and I'm so glad that Steven is here because I have a lot of questions that we're going to need to work together on. And you guys can see at the top there's a quote there from a Poe story. I just thought it was awesome, which is why I wrote it down. And I think that when you're brainstorming, you should let that be your guiding force. Like, do you think something is cool and awesome?
Oh,
Sure,
yeah.
then write it down. Like, maybe you don't even know how it's going to relate to your story yet. You
Yeah.
probably won't, but that's
Right.
okay.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, that already gives you ideas for potential monsters or really villains, potential NPCs.
Yep.
Maybe that's the, you know, a line given when someone's turning on someone. I love it. I love it.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said that because in particular, I thought this might be like a worldview that one of the NPCs has. Because it seems
Yes.
like someone has a chip to bear a little bit on their shoulder.
Right.
Is it a cross to bear or is it a chip on your shoulder?
Yeah.
know.
I think this would be a chip on their shoulder, I think.
A little bit. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it seems like a really interesting like worldview.
Right.
Anyway, who knows? Who knows?
I
what
love
will
it. That's perfect.
So we're looking, okay, and then we're looking at the next section, which is our design goals. And anybody who's sitting down to write an adventure, I think you should probably do this first where you're thinking,
Mhm.
okay, I'm going to write an adventure, but what do I need to achieve with this adventure? Like in broad
Right.
strokes.
Right. Yeah. Is this a one shot? Is this meant to last 3 sessions? You know, that's pure length. I think you clearly get into stuff of what do I want the characters to feel? What do I want the 3 pillars focus to be? Is this going to be a combat heavy one where we're defending a keep, a social heavy one? Yeah, agreed. These are those requirements we're talking about.
That's really good. We're going to write that in because we should consider that. What of the 3 pillars will we use or emphasize?
Yeah, love
I've
it.
never thought about that. That's a great idea. Yes, exactly. So I guess like the first question, and Steven, this is sort of informed by your experience as a DM.
Mhm.
How long do you think this needs to go for?
Yeah, great question. So the last one, I think we were just under 3 hours, and I don't think people were losing steam, but I think we run the risk of that happening. I would rather leave people wanting more than people getting tired of it. So I would say maybe we target 2 hours. In my experience, things always go longer than you expect. So if we're planning on 2 hours, then maybe, you know, that's sort of like setting your clock a little early like I do. My clock is like 5 minutes early. So,
Yeah.
you know, we say 2 hours, but really we think it'll take 2.5 hours, right?
Got it. And that's super important to know because that's going to inform how many encounters we can actually have.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, and you know what? I like this idea. I think when I was writing Masque of the Worms, I aimed for about 3 hours worth of content,
Right.
which maybe had the the effect of maybe forcing you to be a little bit rushed or something? I don't know if you ever felt like that while you were running it.
No, I definitely felt like I was on a razor's edge, though. I felt like if the players got too stymied or too interested in like the horses in the stable, like I could lose them. I could really lose them. And I had some feedback for you about kind of that final bit where people sort of thought they were supposed to continue, right? So I think I just adjusted kind of how I presented that.
Yes.
So no, I never felt rushed, but I did feel like if I let people get diverted, then we're gonna have to rush.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
Good to know.
Yeah.
See, this is why we plan. So
right.
Okay, so now we know we have 2 hours to work with.
Yep.
That's gonna be the number one defining thing about how we write this adventure, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and this is true for any adventure that people write. So if you want it to fit into one night of gameplay, you need to know how long you normally play for. If you want it to be, a multi-session thing, then you have a little more leeway. But
yeah, like I'll just share. I think your adventures for us typically take 2 sessions, but that's because we tend to weave in our own elements as well. Like the Tiger King took, I think, 2.5 sessions, but we had a lot of diversions, a lot of like side stuff interjected. Skyhorn took us 2 episodes. Yeah. So,
and that's good. I think those full-length adventures, I aim for about 2 sessions worth, which is like, I would say like, I calculate it by hours. So like 6 to 8 hours of gameplay is like 2 sessions. Yeah.
I think you usually list 6 to 8 hours. So we're probably right on the money with your estimates. I think in general, if you're saying 6 to 8 hours, given that we add a lot of extra fluff. So if we target 2 hours, I feel confident that we can get there in 2 and have some wiggle room to go to 2.5 if interesting things happen.
Awesome. I like that. Right. So then that brings us to our next thing, which maybe is a subcategory just we'll quickly touch on. When you're running a combat, do you have a sense for about how long you think that takes generally?
Not hugely. I mean, I'll kind of look at what things the monsters do and how many monsters there are, because that tends to elevate it quite a bit, and also what level the players are, right? So once people are higher level, they've got a lot of stuff to deal with. It's a lot harder to get through combat, or how comfortable players are with their characters. And I will say, in this scenario, we're going to have 2 people who are not terribly familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, who we're going to do our best to prep for, but they're going to be kind of figuring it out still, again, on the fly. So I think we should definitely count for combat taking a good bit, especially given that we're going to have 6 players. Two encounters is probably max, and both of those encounters we should probably target 2 to 4 rounds maximum, right?
Got it. Good call. So we'll say 2 to 4 rounds per combat, and I'd say I think that generally speaking, a fast combat takes between 20 to 30 minutes.
I agree. Yep, I think that's about right.
But so we'll make sure to emphasize that. So again, this is a crucial part of planning. What kinds of combats do we want in this adventure? Do we want tough, like long, painful, enduring type combats? Probably not.
Yeah.
Nope, we don't want that.
I don't think so.
So now we know this. Now whenever we're designing a combat, it's going to have to get filtered through this goal.
Right. Relatively quick. And I will say this, for the final fight, at least, I really want to do something interesting with the environment. And I think we're going to have a real challenge there, given that it's also theater of the mind. So I don't know what that is, but a great example. And honestly, Raven's in the chat right now. She's one of those players that I want to try to cater that to, because she's always the one swinging off chandeliers. So I got to think about, like, what are the things besides it's not just a grid with a couple of boxes you can't walk through. I got to think about the 3D elements and the things that people can use to their advantage outside of just their character abilities. So I would love to really think about the environment we have, at the very least, the kind of final fight in, whether it's a boss or whatever it is, that last fight. The first one could be, I don't know, just thinking out loud here. You know how a lot of classic video games kind of teach you the mechanics you're going to need to know later? So we could almost have the first fight have some small minor element of that environmental effect, and then the final fight like expands that all the way out.
I like that. So the first fight's like almost like foreshadowing, or like a little bit like a hint
Right.
Foreshadowing, hint. I like that, and that's a great design idea, because we could play this into the adventure by maybe having an increasing threat over time.
Yeah.
So maybe we can note that down, like an increasing threat.
Yeah. Something that's sort of oppressively pushing down on you. And I'm jumping ahead here, but I know where your head was going a little bit with the kind of a floral, natural approach, given that a lot of Poe's writing is very natural. And again, we're going to be playing in this beautiful courtyard in April. So even the thought of like the, nature pushing in, right? It's just sort of surrounding you, right? And I don't know, that just popped in my head.
Good. See, this is good. This is why, again, brainstorming helps you start to come up with some ideas and gives you some direction. So we're going to use that. We'll use that a little bit later on. So
cool.
Okay. So we kind of have an idea of like how much fighting, how we want them to feel. So that's great. So we should move on to a couple other little planning details. Like we know our character level is 2, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
2.
Okay.
We'll probably just advance after each one.
Good.
So that, in like 15 years when we're doing Poe, 2030 something, 2043 or something, it'll be level 20.
I'll be like, we're running out of monsters.
Yeah. It'll all be hollow vids then, though. Everyone taps directly into our brains when we stream.
Oh, God. Can you imagine? Man, it's like roll 20 on your brain. So
second level, but I think second level is still a good spot where we're not going to get overly bogged down. No one yet has overly complicated capabilities. We're not even to level 2 spells. Most people don't yet have their subclass. So I think level 2 won't be materially more challenging than level 1. I think when we get to level 3, we're going to need to even again think about the length of combats and stuff, just mostly the newer players specifically.
Right. So this is all true. And I think bearing in mind the level, you want to do that because we know already how we want the combats to feel generally. And we have to consider how much punishment can a second level character take.
Right.
Not a lot.
Right.
So that's going to inform how we design these combats.
Yep.
Hands down. And it's less about how much damage they can deal. It's more about how much punishment they can take.
Yep. 100%.
All right. Now here's a big question. What if someone dies during the live stream?
I was so nervous about that in the first game. Like, man, that would be awful. I don't mind if someone dies in the final fight, but it would really suck if someone dies in that first encounter. I'm trying to think what the classes are, and I don't even remember if there was a cleric. I don't remember what Lydia played. Was she a cleric? I know Debbie was a sorcerer. I honestly don't remember. I'll have to look. I'll look at the party composition because they're going to be playing those same characters. I think as long as there's 2 party members capable of casting a heal or a healing word, maybe I'll even make sure everyone has a healing potion. Probably the party will keep everybody alive.
Got it.
But, worst case, if someone dies, I don't know. We'll have to figure that out somewhat on the fly, I think. That'd be too hard to account for and bake into the adventure, I think.
It would, but it's good to know, too, like, I think often when you're designing an adventure, it's a little bit more like, well, if someone dies, they die. Like that's kind of like you have to look at it that way.
Right.
But when we're talking about something that has the extra layer of being a live performance, we should consider it more carefully. Like, we just want to make sure we're mindful. So
Right. No, you're right. You're totally right.
But having healing doesn't make combat uninteresting. So maybe it would be smart for us to make sure there's some form of like mild healing available.
Yeah, and I think it's also just a matter of balancing that first fight. If we're looking at the numbers, I don't ever use the challenge rating stuff, really. I use it as a guideline and that's it. But we don't need to have that first fight be like, it can be a foregone conclusion that they're going to win, but it's an opportunity to roll dice, get warmed up, try out whatever cool mechanics we're going to do. And so maybe it's, several easier monsters or a monster that has a lot of hit points but doesn't hit very hard, just to give that warm up, but not really have any material threat there.
Yeah, and that gave me a great idea just now, you saying that. Sometimes the thing that's tense about a combat isn't the threat of death.
Right.
It
Yeah.
could be someone else getting hurt. It could be saving somebody. So
Oh,
maybe
man.
we can even make
Yes.
that first combat. The threat isn't actually necessarily player death. It's something different.
Yes. I mean, that feeds right into that kind of ticking clock, that something that's oppressive. I saw Wiley mentioned, right, how do we want the players to feel? I like the idea of like baking in a sense of creeping, pushing dread, right? Like in that movie Annihilation. Where
that movie, I know. I actually got to watch it.
I know.
It was so cool. Oh my God, I had so many ideas from it. It's so cool.
Yeah.
I like that. So the first combat, maybe we don't need it. Maybe somebody is being threatened by the scary environment we're trying to make seem scary. So that'll help us by putting someone else in peril. That'll help illustrate that it's like scary and dangerous.
Right.
So let's hold on to that. These are good ideas.
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, zombie, thank you. That's right. It was that. You're totally right. I forgot. There is definitely no heals. We'll at least give out some healing potions from the, the quest giver, however the quest gets activated. Definitely.
Cool. Okay. So the 3 pillars we're going to emphasize, I guess we're definitely going to have we want to have like a dramatic combat. I mean,
right. Of course.
We'll say dramatic combat. And my suggestion in this is that exploration is not hugely emphasized because that has the as you talked about with the horses, that has the potential to completely go off the rails with
Agreed.
with the timing we need to achieve. So
but I think we can think about it less mechanically and more the exploration aspect can be the weird environment. So it can be experienced, but not necessarily something to be, I don't want to say interacted with, but it's sort of the whole backdrop so that it's still present. Because I think we're moving towards something in a very strange landscape, familiar but strange, right? And so I think it's still going to be there. It's just if you're thinking of traditional, like out in the wilderness, following paths exploration, maybe not so much, but it's exploration maybe of the unknown or the strange. So I think we can still. I think we're checking the box basically on it, I guess.
Exactly. And we can emphasize something like discovery, where that's still exploration, like finding out the answer to why this place is this way. That might be a good form of exploration.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. So what are our 3 pillars? There's combat, exploration.
Combat and social interaction.
Right. We should totally do some cool social. Yeah,
so that brings me to a point I was going to bring up. One of the things that I loved about Masque of the Worms was the final boss getting his crazed monologue, which was, of course, quoting the Conqueror Worm. As a DM, and as me personally, not even as a general DM, but as me in a setting where we are presenting the best live stream we can to an audience, I would hate to be in the final encounter the battle computer, right? Like, I like explaining how combats happen, and normally that's not something I think much about, but I want to make sure that me personally, I have the opportunity to chew on the scenery a little bit too at in the grand climax. That's not just explaining what things are happening. So you gave me that opportunity in the first one, and that formula felt really good for me because I got to be the crazed, maniac shouting stuff while also being the battle computer.
But credit to you because you were like, can we have a monologue? And I was like, oh, I've never written I've never tried to incorporate a really I'm not going to say scripted because it wasn't, but like a monologue or options for a monologue.
Right.
And that was actually one of my favorite creative challenges, and I'm so glad that you wanted that because it really made something cool.
It was awesome. I was just coming off the Strahd finale and trying to get inside of that monster's head, and so I just really wanted the opportunity to be like, make the players hate me, right? Like, make the players be like, oh my god, this dude is the worst because he's pushing all my buttons right now.
I love it. Oh man, you did so great with Strahd, by the way, and I love the clip of the final moment.
Yeah, that always gets me.
I love it. Oh man. Well, we're actually really close to being through our goals, our design goals. This next one we talked about, which is we want the combat to be engaging and fun to watch.
Right. Yeah, which is hard to pull off sometimes because combat is the slowest part of D&D.
Yeah.
So that's why I think if we really do focus on things external to just the class abilities and monster rolls, I think we can make it really fun. Again, the chandeliers in the room, like, okay, oh, it's my turn. Okay, we're hanging from these ropes we're fighting on the side of a cliff. My rope is fraying, so I swing, grab the enemy's rope, and try to attack from above, or something that even makes it interesting for people watching, because it's kind of a emergent storytelling.
That just gave me a great idea. Okay, so we want combats to be not just about swinging the sword and hitting and dealing damage. So
right.
One neat trick for making a combat fast and tense is to have like a timer sort of element to it.
Absolutely.
And having the end of the combat be not just killing the creatures. It's
right.
Like something like escaping or surviving just long enough to get away.
Yes.
So maybe, like as an idea, we could have the first encounter be the players just trying to get through an entry somehow into the
I love that.
zone.
It's Jurassic Park, them escaping the T-Rex, right? Climbing down the strangely suddenly massive cliff right there.
Yes, and
it's
there's pressure on you to get away or get through.
Right. The way out is through. Not to bash something to death, but to get out or get past.
Yeah.
I love it.
And from what you were describing, I was even imagining like them scaling down a cliff face with like fraying ropes and like pterodactyls flying at them.
Oh my god, yes. That's exactly where my head went too. Just everybody and like looking up and there's something that's coming down, so they have to keep descending as fast as they can.
Yeah.
Fraying ropes. Oh man, yeah, that's cool.
We'll just note that down as a theme. Like maybe we'll make that scene or maybe it won't look anything like that, but we want that vibe. So.
Yeah. Just an aside, I think adding verticalness to fights it's both hard to pull off, but also can be really incredible.
Yes. And it is hard to pull off without a map. So sometimes the way through that is trying to make sort of a specific mechanic for your progress.
Yes.
Like we're not measuring the every 30 feet. We're saying every turn you
descend X percentage or whatever. You're halfway down now and it's going to take you 2 more turns at this rate to get to the bottom or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. And you need to successfully descend 3 times and maybe something prevents you from descending. So now you're like, crap, my rope is fraying. I'm still halfway up the cliff.
Right. So
we'll say maybe we'll note that. That's good. Mechanic for descending.
Yeah, I love it. I'm about to open a new tab and go to Amazon and buy that Runehammer's Encounter Tuners. Here, I'll pull this tab off so you guys don't have to see me do this, but I'm totally buying it right now.
Oh, which thing is it? Is it
Runehammer's Encounter Tuners? Can I get it off Amazon or is it a PDF?
Oh, it's a video. It's a video.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it's on. I can get the link for you guys, but it's on YouTube.
Well, that's even easier. Channel. I was ready to throw money at it, so.
Oh
cool.
my gosh! But
all right.
I honestly, and this is total disclosure of credit where it's due. Before I ever wrote my first adventure, I inhaled all of Runehammer's stuff because he has such a good way of making mechanics out of turning combat into sort of a tense thing using mechanics.
You've mentioned it several times and I have been bad about checking it out, so I'm gonna follow up on that. Oh, don't look at all the Star Trek stuff I've been watching lately. You get to see my recent. I've been watching tons of Star Trek videos. So all right, cool. It's this Runehammer right here.
Wait, I can't see your screen.
Is it a red logo with a Celtic knot?
Yes.
Cool. I'm there.
He was in the chat on our
Greetings,
last
programs.
Adventure Engineers. It's kind of.
I remember that. Right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna churn through all of these. Thank you for the recommend.
Yes, absolutely. So there we are. So there's some cool mechanical design stuff, and I think looking at this, Steven, I think we have some really good design goals set out. We kind of have some boundaries for ourselves now.
Yeah, me too.
And you probably agree with this, but I think that boundaries inspire creativity instead
Absolutely.
of stifle it.
I 100% think that. It's probably why I always go off on my rants about Sandbox not actually being as fun as people think it is. The trick is to trick people. Yeah, you're totally in a sandbox. Nah.
No, and it's funny because I feel like we've both tried to do sandboxes and been like, this doesn't like feel as inspired.
Not as satisfying in the end, but yeah.
Someone's gonna hate us for saying that.
I know. It's a bad word. So moving on, horror themes. Clearly we want to stick with that, but I think you were very wise to say, Poe is more than just horror. He does get pigeonholed into, spooky Halloween motifs and stuff, but there is a lot of nature in his writing. And in fact, I was thinking we could even, maybe this is not making my point, but we could read El Dorado here. You want to do a reading?
Will you?
I've got it
You're so much
ready.
better at narrating than me.
All right. Let's see if I can pull this off. This is an amazing poem, but here we go. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song, in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim's shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado.
Yeah. That's so
It's so
cool.
good. It's such a good one.
I love that one. And the excellent thing about Poe's poems, especially ones like that, is that they really inspire sort of vibe and tone.
Right.
So that's actually something I noted now in our notes here. I guess, so Stephen and I did a little bit of homework ahead of time. We chose some Poe works that we wanted to maybe incorporate into this, and we read them. So,
Yep.
And I made some notes, which you may have done so too, or even mental notes, Stephen, but I just wrote down some notes about how, like, what I found interesting about these things.
Right.
That was a beautiful reading, by the way.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I love that one. I think that's, there's a lot to take out of that poem, but you also got me really excited about The City in the Sea. That was one I had not previously read, I'm ashamed to admit. And it's so beautiful and creepy and awesome, and this beautiful city that sinks beneath the waves, and I don't know, just fantastic. And I'm sure there's plenty of things we could borrow from that. Even just, this kind of second stanza, there's a lot of descriptions. Mm-hmm. We could even just wholesale use those, because part of what we want to do too is mention the fact, or not mention, we want to sneak in deliberate Poe references so that people who are here because of Poe are like, tight, I got it, I got that, right?
Yes.
So it'd be cool. Yeah, it'd be cool to even, as a DM description, this is what something looks like, right?
Yes.
Yeah, is that supposed to say sculptured? Sculptured? Is that a word?
Oh, is that what that's? I can't. Oh, I'm not on the screen you're on. I'm looking at
anyways, of sculptured ivy and stone flowers, up many and many a marvelous shrine whose wreathed friezes intertwined. I think there's a lot of typos in this. The viol, the violet, and the vine. Just some amazing language there.
Yes. That's one thing I took out of that poem in particular was the descriptions and like the again, I always say vibe. I think I overuse that word, but it's the idea of like shrines and like there's a ton of awesome like sort of like destroyed infrastructure referenced in the city that's like splendorous,
Yes.
And I think that's so cool. They had like, I wrote down a quote actually. I was like, the idol's diamond eye.
Oh yeah.
Like we have to have a diamond-eyed idol now, of course, because that's so cool.
I also told you earlier my personal connection to from a proud tower in the town, death looks gigantically down. I would love to include that somewhere. That's a personal one. Just something. It could even be just there's a huge standing tower and you get the sense that something is watching, or I don't know. You know, in the story or in the poem, it's clearly, you know, death is looking over the splendid city and is content, but
yeah, I feel like we might have to do some kind of like abandoned garden that has like a tower.
Yeah.
And there's like, it's both beautiful and overrun because it's been untended.
I love it. I love it.
I feel like this tower, this is coming together for me now that I just had this idea, but I feel like the tower is going to have to be some sort of location they need to go to. And maybe it's like the fulcrum of this crazy thing that's happening in the garden.
Yeah. Well, and that adds to what we were just talking about, adds some verticalness, and maybe they have to scale the tower, and something is creeping up behind them and below. So
yeah, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just gonna keep writing notes in here. So scale the tower. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, that'll be cool. All right, so moving on. Where were we last? Is that kind of it for our design goals?
I think it is, really. You know, we sort of have all the decisions we're going to make will probably need to be filtered through these items.
Right.
So we don't want too many, but we want to make sure we know like what we're going for ultimately. Right. So
right.
Yes. And that kind of took us into our first step, which was to gather inspiration. Like, this is something I do for everything I write. I know the goals first. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to write a 20th level adventure.
Right.
Like, I know that before I start researching.
It's going to take this long. It's going to have these themes.
Exactly. And then I start researching because now you want to get ideas. And if we've seen just from our back and forth that we've already generated a lot of ideas, right?
Right.
In fact, I would argue that we already could write the adventure based on what we talked about.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's okay. We'll keep thinking through it. We'll overthink it and work the process.
Exactly, because we also want to do other things, like we want to work up some cool locations and NPCs.
Right.
Yeah, so we have our research that we did. And I will also say, I'm guilty of this. If you're writing an adventure and you're at the research phase, you must limit yourself. Do not do infinite research because it's so tempting, you know? Like I have to read this novel now, and like I have to go watch 6 movies now. Like there's a point of diminishing returns where you don't need to keep doing research. You need to stop stalling and start writing. Interesting.
That's really good. That's really good advice. I mean, yeah, the same is true of a lot of things. You can over prepare, but sometimes just doing it is the best way to go, right?
Yeah. You got to know when you're starting to like hold yourself back.
Do you limit yourself in the number of hours or anything like that? Or just kind of hey, I know I want to do more, but I know I have enough. It's time to stop. Is it discipline for you?
Maybe. Yeah. I think what I do is I try to, I try to select, like, I'm going to look at these particular bodies of work, like for Poe. Like I was like, I'm going to look at these 5 poems.
Right.
Originally, I think for the first Poe adventure, I did more research than I needed to because I just wanted to get familiar with Poe's whole body of work.
Right.
But as a general rule of thumb, I would say limit yourself to, man, that's a tough one. How can you limit yourself?
Yeah. It's hard, right? I mean, is it, I guess it's a little bit of a gut feel. It's sort of a thing to keep in the back of your mind. Hey, I, at some point, enough is enough. And maybe figuring out what that line is challenging, but you should know that there is a line, and it's probably earlier than you think it is.
It is. Maybe, in fact, maybe this just came to me as well. Once you have a vision of a problem that needs to be solved, you actually have a plot. So
sure.
I would say research until you have come up with something bad that's happening somewhere that needs to be fixed. And it can be pretty vague. Like a jungle with something bad happening in it and the players have to go in and fix it.
Right. That's cool.
We have that already. So do we need to do much more research? Not much, you know?
Right. Yeah. That's cool. I like that. By the way, you just jogged my memory on something. I did forget a major requirement. And that requirement is we have to have an NPC or a player character that you can play where it's okay that it's somewhat omniscient or you just, abstract the fact that you know stuff, but because you're coming down for this one, that's going to be awesome. You're going to play in it. Yeah.
This is fun. So maybe this can be something like I've never done something like this before where we can write an NPC that another DM or outside person has the option of portraying. Right.
It's almost like a DMPC, which is kind of a problem in other settings. But in this case, you're almost like a co-DM, but an NPC. But I think you just make a player character and play normally. I think it's more about, what your character knows and what you have to do to kind of either help or even hinder the characters a little bit or something.
So do you think I should be the Shadow from El Dorado?
Oh my god, that'd be so awesome. Yes.
Let's do that.
Yes.
Because he sort of helps, kind of.
So that's funny that you say that, because I think in the end he's sort of saying, yeah, El Dorado is your death, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I know that's super on the nose. So yeah, maybe, helpful, maybe cryptic, definitely.
Yeah. I think that the purpose of the narrator maybe can be to point them in the right direction. Yeah, we'll have to think more on that, but yeah, there's something there. The Shadow from El Dorado, I think that could be the core of it in some way.
Oh man, that should be the title of the adventure.
Oh, that would be cool. The Shadow from El Dorado.
Yeah. Actually, that brings up a question. When do you think of the title? Because whenever I've even thought about stuff, I tend to come up with the title early. And I'm like, cool, that's what I'm going to do. And everything I do kind of points back up to that. But I know that's probably not a great practice. And I don't think I know anyone else who has done that. But curious when you settle on it.
There are totally people who get their entire idea from a title that they just make up. They don't even know what it's going to be about. And they're what's an example? I know there's, Hank from Runehammer does this. He's like, The Flight of the Red Sword, or The Last Flight of the Red Sword was an adventure that he wrote.
Yeah.
And all he had was the title to start with, no plans for what it was about.
Cool. That's cool.
Funny. Yeah, it's cool. I, on the other hand, for some reason, come up with the title really late into developing.
Yeah. Most authors I know tend to come up with the title late, which always boggled my mind. I was like, but it's the coolest part. It's the name of the song. When writing a song, I would frequently start with the name.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I think if you're a musician or the kind of person who derives the tone of the whole thing from the title, you should totally do that first. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Interesting.
So cool.
Anyways, I think it's important to think about that PC, because I think the easy thing we could do is just be a PC who doesn't know as much as you, the player, know. And that's fine. That would be totally cool. But I think we could play with it a little more. I think you could know things that are coming and relay that information in a weird or interesting way. There's a lot we can do with it.
Yeah, so knows what's coming up. And I get the sense too, because we want the players to still be the heroes and the focus, and we don't want the outside character to become a de facto member of the party who now has to sit at the table and stuff.
Right.
So some kind of way that we can make this person come and go, as needed.
Yeah. Yeah, makes total sense.
Let me write that in there. Come and go as needed. Yeah.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
So just a quick finger on the pulse. We've got about 12 minutes left here. Not that if we go over a little bit, that'd be fine, but I think we're kind of committed to keeping it to an hour. I think that, again, I think you and I thrive under requirements and rules and constraints. So before we go much further, if anybody has a question, feel free to sound off. Otherwise, we should probably kind of look at what our next steps are, and then kind of wrap it up for the evening. But I think this is shaping up to be something cool. I'm starting to get some ideas in my head. I know you and I will probably kick some ideas back and forth, but I think it would be interesting to follow up on this next episode. I mean, this has been super fun, and I think kind of there are other streams out there that do a lot of stuff like this, but I think it's a super fun. It's a super fun way to interact.
Yeah, and it's just neat. I think it's unusual that you're like a very like experienced DM of live streaming stuff, and like I don't know, I think it's cool that we can kind of develop stuff that's literally for publication, like using this method. So
yeah, it's fun, and I just love anything that exposes the process to people so that people can learn from it, right?
Yes.
If anyone in the chat right now is like, oh man, I'm totally stealing the format of this document, then awesome, we've done our job.
Yeah, like we should figure out a way to share this with everyone who wants to see it.
That's a good idea.
Even like as we work on it.
You know, hilariously, there is a Castle Mac website. I don't think I've updated it in like...
Oh no.
Let's see if it's even there. Oh yeah, look at that. April 16th was the last time I updated it. So
April 16th. Geez, we're coming up on... You're about to lap yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Carapace had a question. I think you were gonna read it there.
I did see. Yeah. So, do you look for other similar published work and try to add something new? Oh, I have done research into other published work. You know, for various reasons. Like if I wrote a 20th level adventure and I read a couple of the very few 20th level things out there.
There's very few.
Yeah, and in fact, I had to read some from earlier editions of D&D because there's so few even for 5th edition. And I did that more to like gauge power level and like expectations and how combat seemed to work for such high levels. So there are always reasons to read similar work, but I would avoid reading too much of it because you don't want to accidentally just like rehash that stuff.
Right. Yeah, good question though. Okay, cool. So I'm looking ahead a little bit to next steps. Again, we don't have too much time left, but consider the important problem. I think if we could think through that in the next couple minutes, we've got an adventure really cooking, right?
We do, and this is the hardest question, actually. So we can dedicate some major brain power now.
Yeah, so thinking about where the last one left off. Clearly, they went to the manor of the new lord, found it a disaster, left, came back to the initial quest giver, and, you know, sort of, it was pretty well wrapped up. There weren't a lot of, you know, threads left open still, I guess. So I think that gives us pretty good free reign for whatever we do or whatever location we travel to. But we also should think about why they're all still together, because they were all assembled by that was he the Duke, I think?
Yeah, he was. I'm gonna have to look even.
Yeah, I have a really bad memory about that stuff.
No, he was the Baron.
Right, the Baron. Yep.
And it was Baron Henrik Rennet.
Yep, that's right. So he did assemble them. Not saying he would necessarily be the quest giver again, but there should be some continuity considered there. We've set this in a vague land, so we clearly don't care necessarily about the broader political things in the land. We don't need to. If we ever need to, it can be something interesting to kind of pull the microscope back and get the broader view, but we don't need to, and certainly not for this one either. So as for a problem, you know, what we know about the party right now is the nobility of the land would probably have heard that they are capable and reliable. They did this job for him. They were hired by him because he already knew they were, you know, reliable. So it could be another noble who's sought them out at his request or something. But we could also get something much more creative than that.
We could. And I think you're onto something with the continuity where we want to try to relate it to the events of the last story, at least like in some way.
Right.
And again, like I thought of this just now with you saying that, but I know that one thread kind of that's very Poe-ish is that the spirit of his wife didn't really get laid to rest. She got killed horribly and it was very tragic, and we didn't really ever have like any sort of like funeral too much or like denouement for her. And it's a super, super Poe thing to have the spirit of a dead woman that you loved haunt you.
Perfect, yes.
And maybe they need to go somewhere to put her soul to rest.
That's incredible. Her family's plot of land or something, right?
Their abandoned gardens or something.
Yes. She's got to be buried with the other matrons of her family, right? But unfortunately, it's in disrepair now. Yeah.
I wonder, like, I feel like, like there's some gardens or something, and we can turn this into a place where her soul decided to go or needs to go. And she's probably causing trouble in some way. Her soul is probably like restless and
Oh my gosh. Someone in the chat, I just missed it. I'll have to scroll back up. Rip Red 6 said Matt Mercer has a homebrew class, a homebrew ghost class. What if you played the shade of her?
Yay! That's a brilliant idea.
Right?
Oh my god, this is genius.
That's at least a possibility, right? That's pretty cool.
Yes.
So you could be this ephemeral ghost that helps, but also haunts and is confused and is, you know, on the other side of the veil, so can't communicate as effectively or something.
Yes. Oh, and this is, you know, this is so crazy because I named her character Eleanor.
Yes, you did. I remember that.
Poe's dead wife, or every
Yep.
one of his poems about someone dead was like named Eleanor.
Eleanor, yep.
And yes, and I think one of his works that's going to be the most inspiring to us is Eleonora, which is about like a hunt, like a mystical garden.
That's perfect. That's awesome. I will say you're gonna have to wear like a really creepy black like veil, I think, to be the ghost of Eleonora.
So sweet. And yeah, and she died horribly, so like she, you know, no spoilers, but she really did not have a nice exit. So
right. Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I love where that's going.
And she's an unreliable narrator, kind of, because maybe she doesn't want to be put to rest, but yet she has some empathy for the PCs because they have a connection to her.
Or some, you know, the classic American trope. I'd have to think of. I'm not sure if Poe relied on that a lot. I can't think off the top of my head, but the unfinished business, right? It's a standard like American ghost story of like she wants to be put to rest, but she can't be. You know, it's not just the location, it's also some unfinished business that has to be taken care of.
Yeah. Ooh. Oh, there's a...
Nice.
Oh, we got the
we'll check that out. Yeah. Although we may not even need stats, right? If you're just this ephemeral ghost that can't fight or help. But I don't know. I also don't want you to not do anything in a combat. I think it's important to have something fun going on. So we'll think of something there. Some mechanic.
Have to think of something. Like, she may become a statted... Like, maybe she'll be the final boss. I don't know. So...
yeah, that could be cool.
In some way.
I love it. That's fantastic idea.
Yay! Oh my gosh, you guys, we came up with literally enough to write a whole adventure just by talking this through. Yeah,
that was so fun. Oh, with just a couple minutes left, I will respond to Houdini's question. This is a departure on the idea that we were going, but I think this is a good way to end the episode here. Do you use any specific techniques to get a player more invested in their character beyond their own backstory? How important do you think it is to take an active approach to this as a DM? I'll start if that's okay.
I was going to ask you this. I want to hear what you think.
Well, it's definitely if a player truly doesn't care about their character, it can probably be hard to get going. I'm again fortunate that my players do care about that. What I will say is different players have a different degree of how much they want to impact their character backstory, and how much they'll come to the table with. So to answer your second question first, I personally think it's really important for the DM to take an active approach if you want your players to care, because you just can't expect everyone to come to the table with a big backstory. In fact, I've actually stopped requiring them. I used to be like, hey, write me like as much backstory as you want. I want to read all about your character's life. I now have kind of the opposite approach of like, we can build this together on the fly. Play the character a couple sessions and then think about it, but let's flesh it out. And here's a great example, right? Castle Matt Coach, his real name is Sean. We call him Coach so as not to confuse them. So Sean's character on Sunday, Hydarion, is this Triton that came from this culture that we started to like flesh out. We're like, let's think about everything about culture. And we're like, you know what? Let's not though. But what we're going to do is these constant like looks at his culture and his backstory, and his parents just showed up last episode. And tomorrow night, we're actually not playing our main storyline. We're playing Triton characters set around the events of why his parents left. So we're doing a whole session devoted to exploring kind of his backstory and his people in a way. So I know that we've succeeded there, and he didn't ever really he did write some pretty cool backstory stuff, but he wouldn't have had to, right? He could have theoretically come to the table with very little, as long as he's willing to meet me in the middle. So that's a roundabout way to say my techniques are make it important, make their backstories important, make characters from their life show up, make their beliefs be put into question, make their homes be threatened, or maybe not always threatened, but valuable in some way, make you have to visit. In previous campaigns, Raven had a background character that she kind of just came up with on the fly. This was my former mentor who taught me everything about druiding. Well, he became incredibly important and showed up in a very tearful way in the finale, and kind of an unexpected but it worked way. So yeah, I guess a very long answer to say yes, I think it's important that DMs should do it. I think if you truly can't get a player interested in the backstory, that's a real bummer, because there's some real interesting stories that can be told there.
And Steven, I've seen you do the thing too, where a moment comes up where you ask a character to improvise a small piece of their backstory, like right on the spot. And you find ways to do that a lot, which is amazing. Yes,
we do flashbacks quite a bit nowadays. I really, really like that as a way for people to not have it written in stone, but be ready to think through it on the spot. And it's so much fun to have a flashback going on, and okay, it's 10 years ago, right? Oh yes, here we go. Let's figure this out. And it's so much fun to do that.
Cool. Oh man. Well, how are we looking? How much time do we have left?
We have 0 minutes right now, so we should probably wrap it up. Let me really quick look at Twitch. Let me find someone to raid. It would be a shame to just wrap this up. Okay, you know what? There is a new stream out there. At least they're new to me. They're called Plot Hunters. They are running Dragon Heist right now. I think they're relatively early in it, or maybe they're doing Dungeons the Mad Mage. Either way, it's set in Waterdeep, and they are trying to reach a goal of hitting 40 average viewers tonight. They're very close. Let's go help them out if we can. So,
do it! Yay!
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. Kelsey, thank you so much. That was awesome to see your brain at work there.
Oh my gosh, we did it together. Thank you for helping. All my ideas are collaborative with you, so this is great.
That was so much fun. And thank you, chat, for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And I don't know, what are we going to talk about next week? We eventually need to talk about Annihilation, because I spent 2 episodes trying to convince you to watch it, and you finally did. But
I did. We should talk about it next time for sure. It was
All
so
right.
cool.
All right, we'll do that. All right, see you guys. Thanks again.
Thanks, you guys. See ya.
Launching this raid in just a couple seconds. Awesome. Cool. 3 seconds and we're out. So adios, everyone, one more time. Thank you so much. Here we go.